it is a non-binding resolution. But in as much as one would appreciate the Senate for recognizing the situation on ground, that is, the poverty that is spreading across the country. Because there's a report I got to understand that as far back as February, about 31.5 million Nigerians were facing a critical food crisis. That was in February, before the escalation of the economic crisis in the country. So I do believe that as at this time now, that projection of 31.5 million would have reached apparently up to 50 million. So there's a crisis in the land, and the senators are appreciative of this situation on ground. But what they are doing, how the executive is going to respond to it, and we see that the executive trying to respond to it by supplying trucks to the various states across party lines. One must appreciate President Bola Tinubu for this gesture he's taking. But in as much as they are doing this, one will ask, how long will this policy translate on ground? And is that a short-term solution or even a long-term solution to the crisis? I don't believe that the Senate and even the administration at the federal level have addressed the critical issues that have led to this food crisis we have in the country. And this borders in the sense that we have lack of production. People who are supposed to go to farm are not going to the farms. Why? The major reason is in some states, in Benue State, in Kaduna State, in Plateau State, borders on the insecurity on ground. I do believe that the Senate should be truthful to itself to address the administration, focus on the major crisis hindering production. Because you should understand that Nigeria was at one time the highest producer of cassava. Now you can, if you go to I was shocked just recently, and when I was told that a muddle of gari sells for more than 1,000 naira. So this is a muddle of gari sells for more than 1,000 naira. So I do believe let the Senate, let the administration focus on the critical issues that have caused this food shortage.
Right. You know, like you said, good initiative or move by the Senate, reminding the federal government that there needs to be more than motion, but movement. There's also the general belief that that legislative arm of government is part of the problem that we have today in Nigeria. In fact, all the arms of government, whether it's the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's also the impression that the federal government doesn't seem that capable with more than 40 ministers, and you're not seeing a lot of input or output, rather, from the ministers at this one.
You see, I was sort of taken aback when Emmanuel said that we should praise the lawmakers this morning. But again, he circled back to say that they need to do more than that, which I totally agree with him. If there's anything that the Senate got right yesterday, is that a hungry man is an angry man, and warning the federal government of the consequences of a hungry man that can be angry. But what I do not really appreciate is when the Senate tries to play to the gallery. So they are saying the right things. Imagine the former president of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, saying that the silos are empty. And one question you will ask him is, when did they become empty? We have a committee on agriculture in the Senate. What has it been doing as oversight functions? Why are we just talking about the issues? Everybody seems to have woken up from slumber all of a sudden, and we have this crisis on our hands. No, it did not start today. It's been there for quite a while. What did we do? We are still not talking about the issues for me particularly. I think that we're beating around the surface, and that's what the Senate is doing. As representatives of the people, of their constituents, what have they done to solve these issues? When we keep having boreholes and street lights as constituency projects, that will not solve poverty, and that will not solve hunger in the land. So we need to do better than playing to the gallery, which I personally think is what's going on here.
Right. Might I add that that Ahmed Lawan, who was the former Senate president under President Muhammad Buhari, was the one that said, Buhari, we're going to give you everything you need. So it was like a carte blanche, and they were borrowing so recklessly like there's no tomorrow. Okay, let's go to Guardian newspaper. I'll circle back to the other anchors. Guardian newspaper talks about the new ministry that is being created by President Bola Tinubu. Tinubu woos herders with livestock ministry, increases fiscal strain. The president has listened to the call to create a special ministry of livestock development to solve the farmer-herder crisis. Miyetti Allah says their hopes has been renewed through this new ministry. A committee has been set up to oversee its establishment. Some see this as a bold move. Others say it's being done to favor the North that claims it's being ostracized in this government. Under the new ministry, there will be fisheries, livestock, crops, etc. Well, another ministry. Nigeria currently has a revenue and expenditure crisis. It spends over 70% of its budget on recurrent. A large part of budgets is now dedicated to debt service because we had ballooning debt and we are borrowing more. It hasn't funded the budget for 2024 very well, and now it's creating a new ministry. This is further financial strain on the government. Emmanuel, is this what we need to solve the farmer-herders crisis at this point?
Well, I will disappoint her this way again by appreciating President Bola Tinubu.
Let's see your face, please. Can we see his face while he's talking?
For the first time,
Yeah.
for the first time, we have seen the administration in more than 8 years confronting this issue. The last administration went around cycles and cycles on this issue. In fact, you remember a top administration official saying that you should save your life and leave the land. But creating a new ministry, just as the Guardian reported, loading the fiscal weight upon the already heavy burden we have in the fiscal side upon the nation, I don't think is the right way to go. We don't need another bureaucracy. It's not another bureaucracy we need to confront the issue. The president should be spot on, addressing the issues. What are the reasons for the conflicts between farmers and herders? Why are the farmers not going to the farms? Why the attacks? I think the president should be spot on, move on, go to the states, go to Benue State, go to Kaduna State, and tackle this issue. Meet with the people there and garner what are the issues. But the president, by creating another bureaucracy, which is going to be based in Abuja, you will see it's not going to solve that.
Right.
I don't believe that's the right way to go about it.
Right. Yeah, okay, finish your thought.
No, I'm saying that's not the right way to go about it. Creating another ministry. You should go to the states, go to Plateau State, address the people there, and bring the heads together and resolve the knotty issues that are causing the conflicts.
Yeah. So do we remember that President Bola Tinubu the other day talked about the Oronsaня report? The administration wanted to implement that report. And the foundation of that report is that we have too many ministries, agencies and departments that are doing similar things and either need to be scrapped or merged. There hasn't been much said about that up till now. We don't know whether they are moving ahead with the implementation, and now we have a new ministry. So it means that words do not match action, indeed.
Well, the talking that are moving ahead with it, but it's in piecemeal. Now, the dirt servicing is about 77%. Different strokes for different folks. And Gail Zalman, the president of Miyetti Allah, that's MACBAN, he's saying that this is, in fact, he said something like a prayer answered, because they've been advising the president to establish this. And now they've established this, it's going to help the pastoralist and it's going to help that industry to grow. That is from his side. From some other angles, the talk is that this is kowtowing to the North. It's a political move to satisfy the North. I mean, these are the different angles to it. But then another side is saying, you're talking about the Oronsaня report, where you want to cut down the cost of governance by reducing the ministries, overheads of government, the amount of money spent, and now you're creating another ministry that would take so much much more money out of the money that the government says it does not have. What Emmanuel said about going, I think it was yesterday, discussed about stop chasing shadows. Stop cutting off the stem, the leaves, and the fruits. Go to the root of the problem. Go to where it is. Find a way to get around this instead of staying in Abuja and creating livestock ministry. And then on the issue before that, protests. When people are angry, when people are hungry, they are angry. And is a ticking time bomb, because he was talking about 1,000. It's 1,005, and that was last month. I mean, Gary, rice is about 2, 3, 2, 5. You can't get mudu of rice for less than 2,000. So it's heavy.
Right. It's Gary, not Gary. Let's not anglicize it. Anyway, look.
You know, I'm used to saying Gary.
Okay. So let's also remember that there was the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, disaster management and social development that was created newly under President Muhammadu Buhari. That ministry was totally bungled. You know, they had a lot of crises or mismanagement, and the minister Umaru Sadiya Farouk has been asked to account for 720 billion naira. I think the EFCC is chasing her around, and of course, Beto Odu was the new minister under this administration, has been suspended. We have these issues with ministries, and then you're creating another one, Nkechi.
I mean, Nigerians, of course, recognize the severity of this herders-farmers conflict and also see that there has to be some sort of solution to that crisis. However, like Indy said, the administration's promise of reducing the cost of governance is really fresh in the public's mind, and then creating a new ministry just appears to be contradictory to that pledge. And when you talk about extensive ministries, agencies, which even struggle, like Dr. Constance just said, with efficiency, accountability, the question now is whether adding a layer of bureaucracy is really the best way to address this issue, or if it will simply lead to more government spending and potential waste. And you also have to talk about the concerns about implementation and sustainability of whatever proposed ministry that the government wants. The idea of tracking livestock, technology, innovation, also raises questions about feasibility, especially in the rural areas with limited infrastructure. So this is just another way of just putting a Band-Aid when someone needs a surgery. It's just not going to solve the situation.
You know, sorry, I was just going to tell Emmanuel that you did not disappoint me on this one. Because, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. Bureaucracy never solves anything, really.
And it's good that everyone pointed out that this ministry, again, Abuja is always the headquarters or wherever the ministry is located, and most times these government institutions are far away from people and totally disconnected from the people, so you don't even know what problem they are solving. Okay, well, that's been created, and I think there will be more reactions in the following dates. Let's go to Punch newspaper and see what they have for us. We'll be looking at the story, Fuel Crisis Lingers as NNPC seeks fresh $2 billion crude-backed loan. The group CEO of NNPC Limited, Mele Kyari, says NNPC is in talks to boost its finances through a crude-backed loan. In August 2023, NNPC announced it had secured a $3.3 billion emergency oil repayment loan from the African Export-Import Bank. Nigeria's crude-backed loans will therefore rise to $5.3 billion when the new one is added. The fresh loan will be against 30,000 to 35,000 barrels of oil per day. NNPC's debt to petrol suppliers in the last 4 months has also hit $6 billion, but NNPC says it's not true. It's debunking that. Well, Nigeria needs a reset from what we're seeing, from one disaster to the other. What it's, I think, was it the president of the African Development Bank, Aki Adesina, right? That's his name. Yeah, that said that all these resource-backed loans that African countries are embarking on and tying their countries into and signing off is not a good idea at all. Emmanuel, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for the past 40 years or thereabouts, we had always thought that the problem with our petroleum sector was constrained to the downstream petroleum industry was constrained to the downstream sector, where the oil authorities have been unable to freely supply petroleum products to the citizenry. Now we know that we also have a big problem in the upstream sector. Now, if we are going to take another $2 billion loan, in addition to the Afro-Exim loan of 3.3 billion, that will make $5.3 billion. Now, you are offsetting this against oil production. Mark you, our oil production has been decreasing. The latest report I think I had was in May, where it declined to 1.25 million barrels per day. So you are going to reduce the amount of oil that we can sell based on this projection, based on this proposal. What does that mean? Cascade to? That means there will be limited foreign exchange incomes coming to the country. I don't believe this is the right way to go. I believe the oil industry, the oil sector, as Dr. Constance did say, needs to be reset. What has been happening, it's not, what we see, it's not helpful. Mark you, this proposal, was it, we will ask, and as I always say, was it in the budget? Nigeria is a democratic society. I do believe the National Assembly should be brought into this to interrogate this proposal. Look at it now. Oil, domestic supply of products is now in a crisis. 2 or 3 months ago, when we had a crisis, the NNPC did say that it was due to logistic reasons. In the latest crisis, they are saying it is a crisis, a conflict between mother and daughter vessels. So the next crisis will be between father and sons. So the problem I do see is that the NNPC has not been transparent. It has not been open. What did they do? What did they do with the last loan they took? And now you want to take another $2 billion loan. This is going to reduce our oil, the crude oil that we are supposed to use that is supposed to be sold to enhance the foreign exchange earnings of the country. So I don't believe this is the right way to go. There should be more interrogation into what the NNPC wants to do, and the democratic structures, I mean the National Assembly, should be brought into this.
Yeah. I think it is a good idea to suggest that the National Assembly intervenes in this. But when you also look at Nigeria as it is today, the reset that we're looking for is not only in the oil sector, it's actually the entire country. When we remember the last administration, President Muhammad Buhari, that crude oil-backed loans was very popular. It was regularly used. And so what that meant was that you'd already sold the thing. The money was no longer there. So you were selling oil, but you weren't getting any cash. And in some cases, it was abused. And, I don't know who gave them this idea, but we are now continuing to use it, not only for NNPC, other sectors of government. Adesua, what are your reflections on this?
Just to add to what Emmanuel has said, I think that there's so much obscurity when it comes to this NNPC as we have it. And you, Dr. Constance, have always raised the issue of how it's so opaque. When the Reuters news agency wrote a story about the NNPC owing about $6 billion, I believe, to suppliers, the agency came out and said, oh, they should name the suppliers. It's not true. But then you wonder, you're going back for a $2 billion loan, and out of it, there's another outstanding $3.3 billion. So what have all these monies gone for? Like you said, we have an issue that was inherited by this administration, this whole crude swap. So we're basically not receiving anything for the oil. So there's the little oil we are able to produce. There are also challenges on that value chain of production in itself. I think it's high time we start telling ourselves the truth, the reality. I don't think we're as buoyant and as rich as we claim as a country, because when you look at all of these issues, it's just borrowing. Where's the money?
Well, it is a potentially rich nation. Currently, it's not, currently it's not rich. So you then having resources is not the deal. It's being able to manage
the
resource and your country, and then you have to get the political system right, because if the politics is not right, it affects every other thing from the economy. So that's why we're talking about the reset.
But I think the opaqueness of the NNPCL is just too much.
There's talk that NNPC, with what is happening with Dangote or that Dangote Refinery, where NNPC is not supplying it fuel, the talk was that NNPC had swapped its oil, and so it's owing a backlog, and so they can't even get oil to Dangote. And now they're selling another $35,000 per day to get a loan. It beats my imagination. One is hard put to explain how these things are working. If you have swapped oil and you're not getting, like Emmanuel said, no foreign exchange, and Dangote Refinery is not one of the problems, one of the challenges he has today is that he's not getting oil from within, to power its refinery. And then you're again going to the same source, to borrow money, again by swapping oil. One is put to understand how these things work. And don't forget that last year, NNPC, I think we seem to have forgotten it, NNPC told us that I think 2 refineries were going to start producing. But up till, this is July, I don't know whether to say they were lying.
I don't think we forgot. We're just used to them saying it will come on stream, and it never comes on stream.
Yeah, it didn't come on up till now.
Technically. Okay, so let's take another story from Punch. 19 Nigerian airports not viable, says FAN. This is according to the MD of the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, Olubunmi Kuko. By the way, I hear that woman is a tough cookie. She knows what she's doing. She says only 3 out of 22 airports under its management are profitable. 19 of the airports in Nigeria are subsidized as they do not get passenger traffic. Airports require maintenance and upgrade in critical infrastructure. According to Punch investigation, 4 airports, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Abuja, Kano, Port Harcourt, Lagos, received the highest passengers. Well, I think this is something that a lot of people know already. It's a brilliant report, and it's good that we're discussing it. This probably gives us direction in terms of priority in critical infrastructure. Airports have become so fashionable for many governors, but is that what we need? Nkechi, let's go to you.
You see, in this report, Mrs. Kuku also touched on an important strategy, what she called cross-subsidization, essentially using the profits from the few successful airports that we have to prop up many of them that are not. And while this, she says, might keep the lights on, it's not sustainable in the long term. So instead of building more airports, we just need to focus on simulating the economic activities and drive traffic through the airports that are actually working. This means obviously prioritizing trade, boosting manufacturing, and also promoting tourism.
All right, we're going to take a breather. When we come back, we'll continue with what the papers are saying on their front pages, both local and international. Don't go away.
Welcome back. You're watching the paper review here on Daybreak, coming to you from our studios in Nigeria's capital. This is Arise News, by the way. And we still have Dr. Constance Okoko, Arise News analyst, social commentator, and journalist in the studio with us. Our guest analyst for the day is Emmanuel. He is in our offsite studios. Welcome back, guys.
Yes, I want us to finish off that story on 19 Nigerian airports not viable. I think what this is telling us is that probably rail works better for our country when you connect everyone by rail, or all the states by rail, because maybe a lot of Nigerians might not afford flights, but trains are cheaper, and then you can also move goods faster and quickly and easier, more conveniently through rail. And then there is no place in Nigeria that you're flying for 3 or 4 hours. It's not United States, you can be flying for 6, 7 hours. Nigeria is very close, so we go to the southeast region, for instance. You have almost like 4 or 5 airports, and everywhere you can drive, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, or even less than that. So it is saying that we need to reprioritize. Ebonyi State Governor, former Ebonyi State Governor, the other time during his administration built an airport, and it's very close to other airports in the southeast. Emmanuel, what are your thoughts briefly on this?
I think that the inauguration of airports by state governors is mostly as a political. It's mostly a political gesture. They've been more political in citing airports for their convenience, not necessarily for the good of the state. Very few states are probably, because the report by FAN, I believe, pertains to federal airports, not state airports. Of the state airports, only very few could be viable. I could count maybe Delta or one other that are presently viable. Most other airports in the country are not viable. So the establishment of airports, federal airports, that was done especially during the Second Republic. But now every state governor is trying to leave a legacy in terms of airport, maybe because it's a capital project with which they can swindle money.
Let's go to Daily Independent. Federal government to invest in made in Nigeria vehicles. This is according to the DG of the National Automotive Design and Development Council, Mr. Oluwemimo Oshanikwe, is it? Oshanikwe. Oshanikwe, yeah. He asked Nigerians to support locally manufactured or assembled vehicles. You need to be, doing it already or have done it already and then show us the results. Government agencies are quick to make an announcement and then we don't hear anything anymore. So you want to see the results already, Adesua? Indeed.
I mean, is it telling Nigerians to patronize made in Nigerian vehicles? Was that what that report is saying?
That's what it's saying.
And this is a government agency personnel. Yes. Well, like I always say, in Nigeria, it is do as I say and not do as I do. Unfortunately, that's what we see from most of these political office holders. It would be nice to see that this starts with the executive arm of government, the judiciary. Imagine seeing all our judges and justices, federal lawmakers and state lawmakers driving made in Nigerian cars, to see the president and everybody in office driving made in Nigerian cars. Imagine the kind of job opportunities that would provide. Imagine what it would do to our economy. But then again, you ask yourself, can we produce locally made cars?
Or assemble. Produce or assemble.
Can we even assemble? And what's the capacity to assemble?
They're already doing.
Can we assemble enough to meet the demands in the markets?
You can make
it happen. But I guess we can start. We can always start. But again, it is better to show example, lead by examples. And then perhaps Nigerians will follow. There's so much talk about, embrace Nigeria, buy locally made goods. There's so many executive orders, 005, 003. I think it's the executive order 005 that says, or 003, I may be wrong now, that says we must patronize and prioritize locally made goods and local content. But we have not seen enough of that.
Well, the point is that there's nothing that is impossible. It's all about vision and planning. Emmanuel, quickly.
Well, I agree with Adesua. The issue is in the doing, not in the talking. I would like to know if the executive director himself is riding a made in Nigeria vehicle.
Exactly.
I would like to know if President Tinubu is hearing. So, because just as she has said, local production of automobiles is one of the major ways of boosting the local economy. That's how Chicago, Motor Town, it was renamed Motor Town. So I think we need to act. The National Assembly should not be exporting jobs. You export jobs by buying locally made, by buying foreign made Toyotas. Let us boost the Nigerian economy. Buy locally made vehicles. And it will translate to creating more jobs.
Right.
Anyway, in fairness to us, it will not be fair. I mean, for example, those of us here, if he's buying a new car now, because I mean you have to start talking about have you produced cars for him to buy a new one. But I mean he has an old car he's using and that won't be made in Nigeria. But the president said.
But there's innocent. So if he's giving his advice, it is only thinkable that he's probably driving an innocent.
No, what I'm saying is you can't begin to blame him. He already has a car. So unless he's buying a new car.
So that's what I'm saying. So the car, exactly, the car he's driving.
The point is when did he buy it? Anyway, the point is when did he buy it? Like when did I buy my car? When did you buy your car?
I'm not the one asking Nigerians to drive with
yeah, but the point is that he's saying, the son to be Director General, is saying that trucks are already assembling trucks and he's working with trucks. Now the next thing he'd want done is for buses, because people buy buses, I mean transporters, to make money. And the president has given the MDAs for them to make any submission for vehicle acquisition, it has to be those manufactured or assembled here in Nigeria. In fact, it has to be compressed natural gas.
CNG,
yes. Yes, CNG. So, yes. I mean, the president has said that, and trucks are working. Right. The next level is buses. Then Nigerians can come in. I mean, this
we wait to see.
A little bit of sense.
Yeah. So the conversation continues. A very vibrant one. Let's go and see what the international top stories are. Financial Times. Can we pull that up? NATO and EU's strange powers of endurance. This is actually an opinion article on the top mass of the Financial Times. It puts a spotlight on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in light of the military summit taking place in Washington, D.C. It talks about a NATO that was almost considered brain dead in 2019 by the president of France, but now has seen a resurgence with Sweden and Finland joining the group. In addition, member states are spending more on defense and even thinking about conscription. Ukraine war was also energized NATO, and it seems to be the most resilient institution headquartered in Brussels, according to this article. Of course, at the summit in DC, spending increase and support for Ukraine is top on the agenda. You know, NATO was founded in 1949 after World War II. That war was so catastrophic, 75 million people dead, about 20 million military, and then you had 40 million civilians. A lot of people died from mass starvation, genocide, mass bombings, and disease and massacres. It was horrific. At the end of that, the Europeans or the Western world said, this cannot happen again. And so that 75th anniversary that is holding in Washington, D.C. is very significant for these countries. Emmanuel, we don't have much time, so briefly.
Well, the NATO Summit, as you did say, the NATO Summit is bringing together the leaders of the 7 leaders of the alliance. But my thought on this is that the NATO Summit is going to be overshadowed by the watch on President Biden, because everyone is going to look and watch the steps of President Biden at this time. Is he capable to continue in office? Is he capable to continue as the leader of the democratic world? I think that's what's likely going to overshadow this summit. Yes, I do agree, the Ukraine crisis, which has been a binder, which has been able to unite and energize the alliance members, is likely to come up, but the impressions on the delivery, on the impressions on the speech that President Biden is going to make at the alliance is likely going to overshadow this summit.
Yeah, I hear you, but also let's kind of give a bit of a context here. After that World War II, I think that the Western nations said we have to put down conditions in order to avert another world war. And some of those conditions are making sure that we banish hunger, creating wealth and prosperity, advancing global trade, which, by the way, they control. And then, of course, that brings in Africa, where you have the resource exploitation. They were deliberate, intentional in creating this world that they wanted to see. There are lessons there. There's nothing that is given to you. We come to our country, Nigeria, and the African continent. We also have to be intentional. Wishful thinking by governments and individuals will not give us the countries that we need or that we require or that we want to see. There has to be actions, steps taken, and this is a question for our generation. You know, the generation that is running us today in Nigeria, you know, the men in their 80s, the 90s, and late 70s, you know, their time is past. The question for our generation today is whether we will rise up and intentionally take back our countries and our continents. Nkechi?
Yes, what you're talking about is actually very important because NATO is very strategic, celebrating 75 years. And yes, there's focus on President Biden, but there's also focus on NATO's future in many respects. The alliance being really shaped a little bit from that Russia 2022 invasion, NATO gaining 2 more members, bringing the total to 32. Some are saying that this summit is coming at the best and also the worst times for NATO. The best time for NATO, showing that it really reiterates the requirements for NATO. It reiterates the reason that NATO was created. It reiterates the show for strength that NATO has shown in these times. Then when it comes to the worst times for NATO at this point, obviously because of the war in Ukraine, as I mentioned, you have challenges of ramping up European defense spending that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and also concerns when it comes to the reliability of the United States looking forward to the election in November, like Emmanuel just mentioned.
Yeah, so let's go to the Independent. You've already mentioned we're going to be looking at the defense spending. So shall we pull up the Independent newspaper? The Independent foreign, not local. So Starmer flies into NATO Summit and defense budget flak. He's having a defense budget flak. The Prime Minister is the new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom. He repeated his Iron Manifesto commitment to raise defense spending to 2.5% of GDP as he attends the NATO Summit in Washington, D.C. But he doesn't say when things would change, and military chiefs warn that it's nowhere near enough. It's not enough, and he's not saying exactly when this spending will begin. Also in Washington, of course, Starmer was also harping on the general spending, you know, within the bloc. They are targeting like 2% increase in spending by every country. And we also remember that Trump was already saying, Europeans, pay up. America is not going to be carrying you anymore. So I think it's part of the reasons, you know, there's so many other reasons why people do not want Trump to become president. But there seems to now be a row between Starmer and defense chiefs about this raise in spending. They say that if they know when it will happen, it helps them to plan. Emmanuel, we're talking about planning again here. These people are already talking, and they're interested in, you know, making sure that things work efficiently. And that's why they're saying ahead of time, tell us now. What are your thoughts?
As you did say, it was President Trump that bullied the other NATO partners to raise their defense spending. And that became very, very appropriate in the face of the Ukraine crisis, that had to see NATO members channel a lot of resources towards boosting the government in Ukraine. What Prime Minister Starmer is now saying, based on his manifesto to raise defense spending, I think is even more than looking at NATO. I think it's also translating into boosting his economy. You do know that defense spending is a very, very important segment of the economy. By projecting more money into the defense sector, governments help to raise and energize the local economies. I see that also as part of Prime Minister Starmer's projections.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for raising the critical place of defense spending. In fact, when you go to the Ukraine war, in a lot of the companies that are supplying the weapons, of course, when America says we are giving $10 billion, so whatever amount of dollars to Ukraine is actually mostly American companies that are doing the defense contracts, and then American weapons are being supplied. So the whole war industry is huge. Wherever there is war, people are making money. And so they are saying we want to stop war. At the same time, you have to wonder, it's ironic.
People are dying.
Exactly. People are dying and people are making money on people. Let's go to the daily graphic of Ghana. So here on the front page, we have NAPO unveiled. It was like a carnival in Ghana yesterday, we're told, as the new patriotic party NPP upped the campaign with a rally. Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh would be unveiled as a running mate, or was unveiled as a running mate to the current Vice President, Mahamudu Bawumia. Bawumia is running for presidency. Ghana elections hold in December, and Prempeh is currently the energy minister. So you have both men in office, and they want to run again. So it looks like everyone wants to stay in power. It's all the same people. Politics seems to be a profession, Adesua.
What they say about power, it's corrupt,
and
absolutely corrupt. Everyone likes power, to be honest. We all have power.
Power is good.
All you need to do is give, the opportunity. Now, what you do with power is what makes the difference. But everybody loves power. I must tell you that. Ghana, all eyes will be on Ghana. Ghana, like Nigeria, has had a stable democracy. It's been one of the pluses or positive on the continent, for many years now. And it's a shining star because we have seen the rising of autocracy, we've seen the rising of coups, but democracy keeps struggling, no matter how expensive and how default it can be. There's this saying that the worst of democracies is better than the best of any dictatorship. So Ghana has, a lot at stake here. The economy is not doing so well as it is around the world, including here in Nigeria. There have been protests in recent times. There have been power cuts. On the lighter side, some Nigerians have been celebrating that we are now in the same boat. We are now in the same boat. You don't have light as well. But so the elections will be fascinating. They'll be interesting.
Right.
The current vice president is the ticket holder for the party, and then you have the energy minister as his vice, and then we'll have the opposing party. Some say it's a 3-horse race, but most people will tell you it's a 2-horse race, really. So we keep an eye on Ghana.
Well, let's look at the economy. Politically, yes, there is democracy, some sort of stability. However, economically, Ghana is not doing great. They have very high inflation rates, elevated interest rates, macroeconomic uncertainties. These are expected to weaken investment. And then you have the current vice president who is also running. So he is part of this government with the president, Nana Akufo-Addo. So you have to wonder, does he have the bona fides to say to Ghanaians that I can make your life better when I become president?
That's where I was going a minute ago to. The Ghana election will be a question. People will be looking at the electorate. Electors will now decide and tell the people who are vying for votes, their votes, we need you to stay or we need you to get out because you didn't do well. I think that's just all I have to say.
Exactly, and you also he has picked his running mate Prempeh, who is the current energy minister. In Ghana, they have this energy crisis that remains an issue, and it's just a weight of public scrutiny on Prempeh himself, as this has been a persistent problem, the energy crisis in Ghana. So it's really a double-edged sword for this administration and the party and their candidates. You also have their main rival, former President John Mahama, and they're both
Mahama again?
Yes. Yeah, he's running again for the 3rd time.
Oh Lord!
And so it's really all eyes will be on Ghana come December.
My goodness, they never want to go do the Emmanuel. I traveled to Ghana recently, and Accra seemed to be like a small, better organized Lagos. That was that. So a lot of people say fantastic, wonderful, brilliant things. it was just better organized. That was that. But what are your reflections on the story?
Well, just as he did say, Ghanaians will be asking themselves, are we better after 8 years of the National Patriotic Party holding forth? That's a question. And it's interesting that Mahama, who was president up to 2015, is now on the ballot as the candidate of the National Democratic Congress. So Ghanaians, it will be a tussle, asking, are we better off today than we were 8 years ago? And it is also interesting that the candidate of the MPP was the former central bank governor. So his handling of the economy, while before he became vice president, will also be an issue. And I also like to point out that there is a split in the MPP because a former minister in the MPP has split. He resigned, I think, in 2023 after Mahama was chosen as the candidate, and is now, I think, is now the third force, the movement for democratic change. So it's going to be quite interesting. MPP is going to be on the spot in this election.
Well, that's all that we can take on the newspaper review. Thank you, Emmanuel, for joining us.
All right, before we let you go, in just a bit now. Yesterday was Spain against France.
And sports.
Yes. There are people who are watching
What
who love
paper,
to
so
hold
they can
on.
put it up quickly.
Where you have
it on the foreign papers.
I think Daily Star has it.
So they won 2-1. Today, Southgate is urging his lads, this is a chance to make history. So they're going out there, the two lands, Netherlands and England, are going out there by 8 today, so we'll see what that holds.
I wonder if Emmanuel can predict. Do you want to predict the Netherlands-England game before I let you go? Take a shot at it.
I will wish England to win.
All right, Premier League. And that will be, thank you for watching. I am Ndi Amungu.
Up next, we'll have the morning show for you. I'm Kitchen Nana.
Thank you so much for being here. I am Adesua Omoran. Good morning.